This is a special episode of Cutting for Sign, where we're going to talk about grief, where you both have had a parent die and at different points in our life and under very different circumstances. And we were just sharing before we started this recording about a little bit about the circumstances around that and our own way that we've grieved. And we are both, I mean, some could say at the midlife point of human existence. We're 40 years old, roughly, and there's some that helps, I think, in some ways, not because it's distance, but because we have more tools to deal with the grief from there. Um, I have a kind of like an anecdotal story of the way the first time I really tried to deal with grief after my dad's, I don't,
Hey, can I say something real quick?
yeah, man.
It's like my like own. I just want to thank you for doing this, Ron. It means a lot to me to have like we just talked for a half hour and you were like started recording and you're just like screw it, we'll just call this the podcast. And
Yeah,
I did kind of personally want to put some bookends on it, just to help the listeners to make sense because we were rambling a little bit, but I appreciate your willingness to continue the spirit of just you and I talking, man.
yeah,
Because that's one of the things that I think is most valuable in people is when they can show their kind of process, and how they relate to other men. Or at least I'm talking about me being identifying as a man, and you too, and relating to each other and showing that. And around grief and anxiety experiences of that, it's just like it's a really important topic to me to um to survive it and go through it and healthfully um navigate difficult emotions as a man in a world that not necessarily hasn't or that necessarily hasn't supported that. We both have very masculine, I would say potentially like fathers who they're working their own stuff out. And so, you know, to like grow up, particularly in 30s, 40s, 50s, and to show that that's a valuable thing, and to show that that's um, a worthy pursuit, and to gain emotional intelligence as a man in this world is, I think, one of the best things that people can do. And that's why I wanted to like have this special episode and this conversation with you. It's more like by default, unintended side effect. It's a special episode, but really, I just wanted to like connect with you because you're my friend, and you know what's going on with me, and I know a little bit about you, and I just like thank you for just like doing this and being okay with it and being just yourself, and in a maybe not the most, well, at least for me, not the most like strong way, in a way.
mm, mm. Um, I don't know how we're gonna put this this episode out or how it's gonna be, but I kind of want to just like recap why we're doing this and where you are. You're in Hawaii. You're staying with the family, the woman who took care of you right after your mother's murder.
Yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to like start over if we could.
Yeah,
And not if we could, we already have, but I mean to do this like podcast. I'm just at a really auspicious, unique location in my life, and I don't think the person needs to know my whole story for me to explain why it's meaningful and interesting. And when I was 4, my mother was killed. Her body was never found, and the person who killed her brought me to the Big Island of Hawaii. And this person dropped me off and my sister with his ex-wife. And right now I'm at that lady's house. So she was kind of a savior in my life, and we didn't know each other for a long time, for like 20, 25 years. And my mother's case got reopened as a very cold case in 2010, and I found her name in the case report, and tracked her down.
Yeah.
And she was like, I remember you and I'm here for you. And she filled in a lot of holes, and she became someone I care deeply about and seen her many times. And so being at this location is uh, has been meaningful to me, for a long time. Um, when I was 20, not knowing that I had ever been to the Big Island as a 4-year-old, I like got injured for in my main coping mechanism was running and activity, and I was a collegiate runner, and I got injured and couldn't do it, and I just freaked out, man, and changed my name for the first time in my life back to the name that I had when I was 4, which was Omar.
Mm.
And I decided to go traveling, and of all the places in the world, I decided to go to the Big Island of Hawaii, to the west side of the Big Island of Hawaii. And you said earlier in our discussion, it's like a homing pigeon.
Yeah.
So it was the second time in my life I showed up an emotional wreck named Omar to the west coast of the Big Island. And I spent 6 months bumming around here within 2 miles of this house and Becca, you know? And so we end up later, decade and a half later, getting connected. And now this place is part of my life. But this is the last thing I say. I appreciate you just listening for me here while we kick this off. But I was telling you earlier, I look at time a little bit differently, and it's an old way to look at time. It's called Kairos time.
Yeah. Can you
Chrono.
explain that? Yeah.
What's that?
Can you explain a little bit of that?
I'll try, man. I'm
Yeah.
still figuring it out myself, brother. But there's Chronos time, which is where we get chronological, and then there's Kairos time. And Western civilization essentially just chose Chronos time, which is chronological, sequential time. It builds over time. Kairos time is experiential. It's described as experiential. It's another way to look at your life and your experiences. And the best way I can at this stage describe it is, if you, let's say you get divorced, in some way you are going right back to the time before you were divorced. The situation is going to look similar, and there might be aspects of your life you have to catch back up that you dropped, from being married. That's just one example. And the example that pertains to this is that in some way, part of me experientially is still a 4-year-old on this island, like kind of a wreck.
Yeah.
And every time I come here, I literally feel like that. Like I arrive here in some way like that. And as time has gone on and I visited here many times, it's just been a nice litmus test, or like tuning for, to see how much I'm growing really, and how much that part of me that still is here has been continuing to develop and mature and grow. And this trip right here, and why we're having this discussion, is because some floodgates kind of opened in me surrounding my mother's disappearance and the emotional fallout of that.
Do you, what is that? What does that feel like for you? Do you feel sad for your mom? Does it feel like you miss her? Does it feel like sad that you were separated? What kind of thoughts come up around that?
Dude, it's fucking it. My issues around my mother come up in romantic relationships. And I just want to like de-taboo this like idea that, it's weird that you might be working out mother issues in a relationship.
Seems
My
like
personal,
completely normal to me.
yeah, me too, man. And I have a very healthy um, romantic relationship that I'm involved in. And it's an open relationship. It's non-monogamous, and so it challenges my sense of safety a lot.
Yeah.
Um, that's not to say that non-monogamous means your challenged sense of your safety, but for most people I've heard that can be a thing, and for me it's an intense thing, because that part of myself that feels safe because of a motherly presence is just very underdeveloped and very skittish, like a like a dog, that's been abused.
Yeah.
Very reactionary, and my experience of it is pretty quick to anxiousness, and my response to that is rejection. So my point is that you know my experience of this, it's up because I'm in a relationship. It's a very healthy relationship. At the same time, it is a relationship that has some danger to it, and it just puts me on edge. I experience anxiety, and the thing that I wanted to talk about here was my experience with anxiety is very much related to grief. And Ron, I think a lot of people are suffering from anxiety, and anxiety is a very, very interesting emotion. Um, and my personal belief is it's the symptom of other things going on.
Yeah.
In my case, suppressed grief, and I have story around that to tell, which we can get to. But my point is just anxiety seems like I can almost think of anxiety as tension, and that tension is an experience of fear, and that level of fear can be fucking mild to where you don't even notice you're doing it consciously, to like it drives you to despair and suicide, and you can't even get through an hour. And
Yeah.
I think people are suffering that out there, and I want to help, man, because I've helped myself, and it's been fucking great, dude.
At a certain point in your journey into adulthood, did you realize that you had not grieved the loss of your mother?
Yeah.
Okay. What happened? When did you realize that?
Started to come up because I couldn't cry. In my 20s, I just started noticing like I didn't cry.
Yeah.
And I knew because I remember from childhood that I cried a lot as a kid, man, a lot. And they weren't happy tears.
Right.
They were tears of frustration and sadness, or not sadness, but frustration and hurt, and what turned that faucet off, you know.
Did your adopted parents also divorced, right?
They did, and that was the tears I experienced. I never grieved my mother's death. I actually asked my adopted father that one time. I was like, dude, did you ever see me cry? And he was like, no, man, I think you were just really relieved to be in a stable situation. Because my mom she dealt drugs and was angry and kind of violent, and she had positive aspects too, but it was not a great environment that I was in. So,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I wanted to ask, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, so in your 20s, so maybe your 30s, you're realizing like you've lost touch with that part of your story, right? Like the grief.
Yeah.
Did you? I know that when my father passed away,
Yeah.
I think few people are prepared for the death of a parent. It's not often that they get the gift of like it's slow. They know it's coming,
Mhm.
and you start grieving beforehand. And even still, it always feels sudden, or I would imagine it feels sudden. But um, you know, I have there's like a whole story of how I learned my dad died, and then there's a whole story of going through the funeral. The funeral was really I was super disconnected during the funeral, and super disconnected from his spouse, who I had only met one time. Um, and she um, didn't like me very much. She tried to sue me later in life, um, for ownership of my dad's trailer, like mobile home trailer. Um, and uh, and so I like it felt like something was stuck in me, like it was like a loose tooth or something, or like this, like a stump in the ground that I couldn't like. It was so big I couldn't kind of even understand how big it was to like remove. And one of the times trying to get rid of it, I took a pistol that my dad had, like this old antique pistol, and a pack of cigarettes, Marlboro Reds that were like his flavor, and maybe something else I can't quite remember. And I folded it up in a deer skin because he he made clothes out of deer skins and things like that. And I crawled up in the furthest bit of wilderness I could find in Orange County, California, was where I was living at the time. It was isolated, man. It was super. It was like halfway between Riverside County, Orange County, and the only thing that was out there is this seasonal fire camp, like for firemen.
Yeah.
And no one was there, and I was like out in there, and I, not knowing what to do, I was like, I just took all my clothes off. It's completely naked, trying to like feel something, trying to like connect with something, and I buried that little package in under this oak tree. And interestingly, I was like, as I put it back down, I had disturbed a fire ant hill, and it just all came out. They're crawling all over me, and I ran out of there naked, like trying to get fire ants off of me. But what's weird about that is during my dad's physical funeral, the backhoe that dug up the plot of land to bury him in like also disturbed fire ants that crawled through the audience there at the graveside service.
Well,
It was so, I don't know. Sometimes I think the universe is like, it's not just winking at you. It's like fucking putting the piece of paper on your back that says "kick me." And
you know, it's like either one of those fire ant situations is auspicious and potentially meaningful
right,
to you, the only one who experienced both of them, and you having this. I mean, you've told me a lot about your dad, man. You know, you're writing about him in our writing group, and you know, you're a good writer, so it's like I'm getting it, and that's amazing. I didn't know that. I mean, you've told me a fire ant story before, but I never put it together that those both things happened.
so I guess the only reason I bring that story up, I was want to apologize for retelling if that that to you. You're like,
No, I
yeah.
did.
um, is the feeling I had with grief is like it's not going away. It's like this thing I learned to like live with in some ways. Um, it sneaks up on me every once in a while. Like I'll see my dad's face and my daughter's face,
God, wow.
or I'll think about a joke that my dad used to tell me when I was like Luca's age, and I'll tell my son the joke, and
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, that's that opens up a topic that is really. We were talking earlier about how grief works, you know, and like I told you, like I've cried more in the last 2 months than I have tears of pain and sorrow than I have in the last 30 years. And and but they're old tears, you know. And so they are grief, and they are triggered by fear, you know, and sadness, but they feel so fucking good coming out, man. It's like orgasmic.
yeah,
But it's also very clear to me that these are not tears of joy. Like, I'm not going to say I'm a connoisseur of tears, but I've had my eye on the like vintage of tear that's been coming out my eyes the last 20 years. Like, I've got a palate, man.
yeah,
And these are different, and they feel like we were kind of joking, like a real zit popping in that little moment where it's just feels really good. And but it'll be like today I had my fucking head in a bed, you know, and just I was like watching a movie that was a sad movie, and movies are one of my ways in. And then, but I can tell when I'm now crying, not about the movie just tapped something, and now I can kind of like siphon some off. But even that language, siphon something off, implies that there's a reservoir of tears and that it's like getting used up as I release it, which is a fine way to look at grief and at suppressed emotion. I don't know if it's the most nuanced and accurate, because for me, what I'm starting to feel more is that it's more like an emotional, it's an emotion that you're touching that hasn't been touched, and it kind of goes off at first, and then the more that you experience it through crying and through whatever you do to actually feel an emotion, particularly a suppressed emotion, it like loses its charge, you know? That's the feeling that I get. It's really charged and then it loses its charge, but it's still there and it'll probably always be there.
Mm. Yeah, it's like a knot in the muscle, and like in your back or something. Like it's there, and somehow the tension gets relieved, but the muscles that's still there in the some form. You know, it's either grown bigger or fragile.
Yeah, 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 man. So
I don't know.
for me, my long journey with experiencing grief, what you just said about you think about seeing your father's face in your daughter, you know, or someone tells a joke or says something.
Yeah.
For me, what happened is I got into a romantic relationship about 5 years ago that wasn't safe. And I know that's kind of like can be brushed off as sort of like almost not woo woo, but like a phrase that doesn't have a lot of meaning and it maybe is overused, like feeling safe, you know, and
I
not
don't think
feeling
so.
safe.
Yeah, I think it's okay.
What I mean by that is just like easily triggered, and now all of a sudden, instead of being calm, my nervous system is going off.
Yeah.
And I was in a relationship that did that a lot, and it just like cranked up, brother. And I to the point where I was experiencing anxiety to like borderline suicidal levels. Like, and by suicidal, I mean where you start to despair, you know, and despair is an awful, awful state of mind. And my heart goes out to anybody who's experiencing it. And get help if you are. I mean, I did, and it worked. Call in the fucking cavalry, you know,
Yeah.
because it's like, and I know that's hard to do. For me, it's like you have to do one of the harder things when you have the least amount of effort. It can be Herculean, and such an act of faith too, because you don't believe.
Yeah.
And so I was in a state like that, and I would just wake up with this experience of anxiety, this terrible, like tense bar of fear in my chest. And I would just like wake up and I wouldn't want to get out of bed because there's like no point. So I eventually would, but I would take a long time doing it. I didn't have like a job in the morning I needed to go to. So I had the privilege of being able to do this, right? Does this all make sense?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I just got super distracted by a scorpion that just walked by my foot like this big.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. You want to see it?
Yes.
You see that shit over there on the floor?
What? That's a scorpion.
Yeah, dude.
That's your living room.
This is my living room. I'm really
He's,
sorry.
he's going to your shoe right now. You know that, right?
He's going to my bed.
Yeah.
It's going like
Oh my God.
cozy up in bed. You know, this morning, my wife and I went and had breakfast, and our waitress, had a scorpion tattoo, and I was like, that seems like a kind of a common totem for folks, the scorpion.
I wonder why.
Yeah,
I
I'm like,
thought, you know, I didn't know what I could tell you had your eye on something,
yeah,
but
it's fucking dangerous.
I'm
my my reptile brain is like, oh shit, here we go.
like
Um,
going off about like existential fear and anxiety, and you're like, yeah, well, there's more pressing
but no, I
situations.
mean, like, dude, I remember, and I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before. Like, I mean, things that you were coming up for me as you were talking about, like not wanting to
Mhm.
get out of bed. Like, it's not that you don't want to; it's like you lose the ability to. And I think that's what people need to understand about folks who deal with that. It's like this isn't a choice. This isn't like I'm choosing like I can do this, I can do that, or this. It's like your damn legs are broken, and folks are asking you to get up and run across the room or go run a race, and it's just not possible. Um, and
I
I
mean,
did you know when you were going through that it was connected to your mom? I mean, did
that's why I was going to tell the story, honestly, because I had a moment that relates to what you were talking about. And I don't know if my experience is quite aligned with what you just said. I think it eventually is a choice, but so is getting up across the room to do something when your legs are broken. It's just fucking hard, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think
Um,
I agree with you on that. Like, I don't want to say it can never come back, but there, for a moment, it's impossible.
it certainly doesn't feel like a choice to be in that state. You know,
Yeah,
you're dealing with subconscious, man. Like anxiety is subconscious. I believe that.
yeah,
And, you know, making it conscious brings out, for me, it brought out the emotion that it was attached to. And I didn't even know it was attached to something else because I hadn't experienced a lot of anxiety. Like I didn't really know. I got overwhelmed by it later in life, you know, or at least later in adulthood,
yeah,
in my 30s. And that's not later in adulthood, but you know what I mean.
yeah.
Um, and so I'm sitting there in that morning, laying down in bed. And long story short, I'm just turning this thing over in my mind, just kind of like experiencing it and suffering it, you know, and like really depressed and angry about it, you know, which I am not like a depressive person. That is not my burden in life. And that's a whole nother ball of wax that I don't know a lot about. But anxiety is different and it can lead to depression, more of an acute depression. And so I'm just like letting my mind go. It's early in the morning. You're a little closer to the, you know, subconscious anyway. And this thought of my ex-wife, I was married for like 7 years and we lived together 9 years. I was basically married 9 years. And we had broken up and gotten divorced a year earlier, 2 years earlier. And I hadn't cried one tear and I hadn't felt one negative emotion. And this was not a completely unhealthy marriage. There was a lot of love there. You know her, you
Yeah.
know, she was
Yeah, you
like,
guys were great. I mean,
she's a great lady, you
a lot of
know.
good stuff. Yeah,
And I was really happy to be out of that marriage because being in committed relationships is challenging for me, which is why I'm in a non-monogamous relationship right now. Not that I've never cheated on anyone, but it just makes my inner world small and it's hard. And so
mm,
I didn't like being married, and um, more's the pity. I really feel terrible about not knowing that part of myself, and you know, theoretically or potentially wasting a lot of time for this amazing human. That's neither here nor there, or that's another subject. So I thought about the home that me and this person created together. We created really beautiful homes. Like we decorated well together, and they were very safe, cozy, nice, comfortable homes. And it all that anxiety, Ron, just dissolved into
yeah.
grief. And it was like it all started to come up, man. And it's probably not just about her because I'd never cried a tear about
Mm.
my birth mother dying, and I'd never cried a tear about my adoptive mother leaving when I was a teenager. And it hit it hard. And
Oh man, I didn't realize your birth mom or your adopted mother left in your teenage years.
you know, a lot of these experiences are perfect storms, right? Like you have major things happen at different stages, and allegedly grief can piggyback. Unexperienced, unexpressed grief can piggyback to some extent.
Yeah. Where were you living when that happened with after your divorce and your relation?
Fucking in the ninth dimension, out in the middle of, well, you would know it, Camas, Oregon, like, or Washington. I don't even know where it is. It's
That's
it's
fine. Yeah, yeah.
it's in the hinterlands,
Yeah.
and that's another story. But I was really off my path, which is another part of it. But I learned a valuable lesson that day, man. And that's that my personal experience of anxiety is directly related to expressed grief. If I'm feeling anxious and I can cry tears of grief or sorrow or pain, I feel better. It's binary, man. It's one plus one equals this thing.
Was that the first time that I mean, was that like a dawning moment for you where like this is something I need to do more of?
Huge, man, but it was overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know, I
What year
couldn't
was
do
that?
it. What's that?
What year was that?
2016, 17.
We've been friends a long time, man, and like part of me, I have memories with you and your ex-wife like together. I have good memories
Yeah.
of me like my relationship with her, like my conversations with her, my conversations with you, time we were both together.
Yeah.
And and your divorce surprised me. Um, didn't shock me because I know how people can hide things
Yeah.
and not share them. Um, but I guess what has been making me kind of sad as I'm listening to you is, man, it's like I just didn't know what you're going through afterwards, and I'm sorry I couldn't have been there for you. That we weren't close enough to.
You couldn't have. My
Yeah,
friends, my other friends who were in proximity couldn't, you know. I was being eaten from the inside by this emotion, this experience of anxiety. I was a ghost. I lost a bunch of weight, and man, I'm super fucking lean, man. I don't have weight to lose.
yeah,
And I lost 10 pounds, lost my appetite. I was getting eaten up, man. And when that grief experience happened, I was like, got it. I know it. I know what's going on now. And what happened? I called my ex-wife and was like, we started being I started being an adult, and like was like things would just come up in my mind that I had done, that were hurtful to her, that I had never been accountable for. And I would call her up and I'd be like, and it was consensual. I was like, hey, I'm going through grief. You know me, and that this is hard, and that I'm not very mature around it. Can you be there for me, or is this too hard for you? And she was like, I got you. And so for fucking like 6 months, man, for like, well, it was 3 months. She gave me carte blanche to call her up, and when something crossed my mind, and that I was just like, I can't believe I did this, and this was so hurtful and neglectful, and we would cry together,
uh,
and and that culminated. And I'm doing this while being with this other woman who is supporting this process. Like, can you imagine how brave that is to be in love with someone and have them going through a grieving process for their ex and in contact with, like, I'm just surrounded by amazing women,
yeah.
life in general.
It's
And
interesting. I wonder. It
yeah,
sounds like your um. I mean, you were talking about your mom earlier and how she's a pretty complex person because she, you know, on drugs. It sounded like a drug dealer, a ball of light and magic at the same time, and
mhm.
curious that you've always been in relationships with women who are really good people. Um, I don't want to like try to connect that too much, man, but like it's
We
interesting
could,
attraction.
I can tease that out for,
Yeah,
a while too. The type of person that, I'm attracted to women, and with in partnering, like that's who I partner with is women. And um, the, 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 the character of the women I've been with has certainly reflected my understanding of myself, and um, that's for sure. And I know what I'm attracted to psychologically and what I'm attracted to physically, and those things definitely have to do with my past. And being aware of those has helped me be able to choose and know my deal breakers, and be able to weight factors. And someone can be incredibly physically beautiful, but I'm not psychologically attracted to them, and so now I know that it's just this type of attraction. And
yeah,
vice versa. Like, I can be not attracted to someone's physical body, but then I just like very attracted to who they are on the inside, their beliefs and emotions and all that, and then okay, and then the idea would be to like, can we get those things overlap? Because then you get like this pretty heightened, incredible experience.
yeah.
But
It's true. Like,
you're
I,
being very generous with. Sorry, go ahead. My fault.
I was just laughing. My wife and I are in Costa Rica right now. We're in a little surfing village that's kind of famous because up until the '90s there was no electricity here, and now it's like a 2 mile long dirt road, literally a dirt road on the beach that is insanely crowded with people. It's a big surf place, and my wife and I are laughing because we've never seen so many good-looking people all in one place, like insanely hot people walking around. Like um, our fishing guide. This is going somewhere, by the way. He's not just talking about hot people.
Okay.
Um, but our fishing guide, uh, you know, is a pro surfer. He's Swiss. His parents moved here from Switzerland before he was born. He was born here. He's Costa Rican. He has a Costa Rican accent, but he's got blonde hair, straight, crazy straight teeth, beautiful face. Like he looks like Thor. He looks like who they were wanted to, that's his body shape.
Yeah.
And I went for this run yesterday. I was just trying to like work out all this like tension in my own life, and ran a bit on the beach, and all these like beautiful golden asses are and breasts are going by me because of all these beautiful people around me. And really what I was feeling was like a lot of gratitude for my wife, who is a beautiful person. And I mean, she's a physically beautiful person, but she also has her own insecurities about being 41 and around these 20-year-old athletes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And, I'm definitely not in shape. But anyway, I mean, I was grateful that I've got the whole package in my relationship, like that I am both attracted to her and that we both share this like deeper vulnerability emotionally, spiritually, physically with one another. And
Well, you're attracted to her personality, like her.
totally, yeah.
Like I didn't know I was attracted to like powerful people,
Mm,
and powerful women to partner with. And I like, I'm really psychologically and ergo sexually attracted. And then a further step of that which would mean in a long lasting way, I can be attracted to someone, if they're like kind of powerful and a little bit dangerous, and really like deciding their own life.
yeah,
They want something and then they just do the thing that gets them to do it. But I'm also very attracted to like kindness and nurturing,
yeah,
and to find that dichotomy, that's the gold for me, and if that happens, it kind of doesn't matter what the person looks like. I mean, I don't want to go too far down that, but it's like that's the important thing for me. And I have noticed in your relationship, I've thought about this before, we never talked about it, but I was like, Ronald has that, I think you're similar. I wonder if you're similar in the type of inner person you're attracted to. And I was like, dude, I think Ronald has both,
yeah. Like uh, my, I guess I would say I have a type. It's like someone who's very driven. Um, but you named all those things. Like if those things aren't there, that emotional connection, that it's like the beauty doesn't matter. I
It
mean,
won't.
I dated a girl who was six. She was taller than me. She must have been 6'1" or 6'2". Runway model in England, and there was just no emotional connections. There was like no like nothing, and I like I couldn't see her with attraction anymore. And um, yeah, so I don't.
when you when you confront and attract though, and be like allowing here, I don't have a lot of articulation around what I'm going to say right now, so I'm working it out. When you do partner with somebody who is representative of things you're really attracted to inwardly,
Yeah,
I have experienced that you more easily confront fear and threat
yeah, I'm
if you
not a
have
kid. Yeah,
attention.
right.
You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah, totally.
And so I happen to be partnered with someone right now, who is the type of person on the inside that I need to be with in all ways.
Wow,
Like as far as I know myself right now, they check every box.
wow.
And not to put it into like, form, like the forms being filled out, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Uh, and that has been incredible, as you've seen. They know it, I know it. It's a it's a it's it's a special love, and
it seems
it's
like
also,
you're like coming alive in a different way, man. Like I've seen this like big transition in you. Uh,
well, Mhm.
How many months have you guys been together?
Just a few, but
Yeah.
I say all that to like return kind of to why I wanted why to do this today, and you're like being very generous by indulging me too, man. And I know you have your own things to say about it, but I appreciate this. With that alignment of inner attraction, you open the doors to what's dangerous. And I think that's why you see a lot of unhealthy relationships and why you see a lot of men in particular being abusive, you know? Like I have a lot of awareness around myself and how to like communicate. And I still get to the point with people I'm intimate with of being to some extent abusive.
What do you
And
mean?
fucking shocked.
Give me like a example in some way.
It's like being harsh with words, or
Mm.
I don't get physical I say anymore because I would like get in my body and stand up and like confront, like walk toward aggressively, you know what I mean?
Right,
And that's more like physical, like gets into like physical abuse.
right, right.
um, I don't do that. And I also don't yell anymore. Like every person I'm with, now we're getting to like therapy session with Daniel. I don't want to go too far down this, but every person I've been with, in love with, they seem to be more sensitive to like what abuse is. And so like I like I can't be as what I was before. And I've gotten to the point where like, if like my partner says they feel like I'm being abusive, it's like because of a tone in my voice,
That's interesting. I mean, that seems like the universe like really trying to get a hold of a part of you that you don't want anymore, and it's like you're like, yeah, I need to deal with this, and the universe is like, all right, asshole, like here we go.
Well said.
Yeah.
I can feel that very clearly. But to keep the train of thought going, I uh, I have been exposed to a part to a person that brings out a lot of that, that connects to that part of me that wants to be loved so bad and is also pushing away love and like a skittish dog.
Mm.
And experiencing that in a mindful way, in a way that's totally supported by them and tons of light on it. And I have friends like you and some articulation around experience and some experience with this in the past where like you've done the fuck ups and you've done the failures in all the way and in many ways you get to a point where you're like, oh shit, it's happening. Like
And you're
this.
seeing a therapist. I mean, like I also want to call that out with you. Like you're doing, I know you well enough. Like you're seeing professional, you're like going through exposing yourself to all the healing modalities you possibly can.
All hands on deck, man. I
Yeah.
want to love. And
Yeah.
every time, like you're in a 13-year marriage, like
Yeah.
I'm in a 13-year period where I've been in love 4 times, and so I've gotten to start over. And every time I start over, I get this fresh, new, delicate, beautiful thing that, I'm very protective of, like resentment and anger and, all the issues that start to build and tear each other apart and make these gaps in people. And so it's been amazing to like protect this and experience a few months in that have been a really like very close, intimate few months, and to be like, oh my God, we didn't fuck it up, like it's still okay.
Yeah.
Somehow got, we fell down the stairs and we came out of it and we're still holding our drink, and it's like, how the heck did that happen? Um,
Yeah.
and so this is what, like, all this is kind of building towards this is, you know, to be in a relationship that's been dangerous and in a way that's really appropriate and manageable, have that supported, be here in Hawaii, and what I say is, and like by dangerous, I mean it relates to like my personal issues around abandonment and rejection. To be here in Hawaii, the place where I was like the most traumatized. They described me when I was 4 and arrived here. Becca describes me, that's whose house I'm at, who
Yeah.
received me when I was 4. She said I was like a refugee. Me and my sister were like refugees. We were just
Yeah.
shell shocked, man. And to like have that shell shocked part now be in contact with someone who's kind of, in some way representing the reason that it's shell shocked. It's amazing, man. It's a really vulnerable, open place to be, and to have a mature experience of tears around that, and know that, if I'm feeling anxiety, that means I need to tap into that emotion and how that happens and start fleshing all that out. It's like it's a dream come true, Ronald. It's like real when people talk about healing, right? And they
Hmm.
talk about like being their better self and all these things that are like keywords and search words and stuff and hot you know um topics. I don't know the words around it, but you know what I mean. It's like this is what it looks like I'm going through it, and I've talked to the talk before, and
Yeah.
now it's like the walk is happening, and I'm just like, oh my god, this is what it looks and feels like. And when I was at my worst 10 years ago, is with this experience when I had no understanding of what was going on in my inner world and I was overwhelmed by it, which I think a lot of people are to varying extents. I promised myself if I got through it, I would help other people because it was fucking hell, you
Yeah.
know? It was hard, dude. And whether it's you're suicidal or whether it's you're just kind of tense,
Yeah.
there's the spectrum, and the same healing process applies to at least what I experienced. And it's happening for me. And I'm just so grateful and thankful. And I
You
really,
know,
really, really want to get this out
a
into the
few
world.
years ago, you and I were starting to hang out a bit more,
Yeah.
and we were discussing um, a particular guy. I forget his name. He wrote a book called I can't remember the name of the book, but we were both listening to meditations that he had made, and and in that his story was he got injured. In his injury he was incapacitated, and being incapacitated he was able to go deep in his mind and like
Yeah.
meditate and like heal, heal his body and do all this stuff.
I know who you're talking about, and I don't want to mention their name because I've come to realize I think they're a little bit of a snake oil salesperson. And I don't want to tarnish them because I know they can be helpful to people on the
Yeah.
journey.
Well, I mean, here's like, um, I think, I mean, I don't want to get too off topic here, but
Yeah.
I think you're right. Like there is a bit of a shine, and there also is a bit of like something actually does work from
Totally.
meditation, right? So, but I remember something you said to me, which had always stuck out, which was, who gets the chance to actually have the bandwidth to deep dive in their mind, to confront a lot of this stuff and heal? And and the answer is you do. Like, the you stuck in Camus, you going through each iteration of a relationship, you now in this relationship, it doesn't look like you're stuck isolated in a room alone going through it, but you have the right, like, the universe or yourself or conglomeration of all of them has created the perfect environment for you to safely confront what has been ailing you. And
Yep.
you have, like him, taken the opportunity to go, I'm not going to let this get away from me. I'm,
Well, okay. That's too generous though, because like you and I are talking earlier, I'm a shit, man. Like I'm fucking lazy in a lot of ways, and I'm like dismissive of what I need to do. If this part of myself were a kid, I would be like, I don't know if I'm the best parent, man. And
dude,
so
I
what
mean,
I'm,
fuck that,
hold on.
honestly. Like, because you're saying that, like 2 minutes ago you're saying I'm walking the walk now, like I did the talk, now I'm walking it.
Yeah, okay. I'm walking it more than I had for
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
So I appreciate you saying that, but like this is what you and I were talking about earlier, you know, like I need to be better because I don't feel great, I don't always
what do
feel
you
safe.
what do you mean by better? Like, what does a better person look like to you?
Being like all the stuff you talk about and coaching your men and in your own life that we talk about, just like one of the benefits of having focused on oneself and having the privilege to focus on oneself for years is you get to know what you need, right? If you're doing it right, you'll know what you need. You'll
Yeah.
know what foods you need to eat. You'll know what sleep schedule you kind of need and how far you can stray from those because you got to do that. You know the level of allowance you need.
Hmm.
You know the type of people you need to be around. You know the type of clothes you need to wear, and you know the type of shit you need to give yourself and not give yourself. and others. You know the words you need to say and not say. You know all of that stuff, man. You learn,
Yeah.
and along the way, however much you know is probably how much you should be doing. And I have never done as much as I've known that I should do. And
What do
I
you think
think I'm
stops
just
you? What separates you from that?
good question, man. What stops you? I mean, laziness. It's hard.
Yeah, yeah.
Or like fucking working all the time.
I
I
am
look at parents who raise kids. That's what stops me. It's hard.
It's hard.
They
Yeah, I'm a little allergic to the word lazy. I don't know if
okay.
I don't even know if the word like is true, because I think when you say it's hard, that's true. Well, why is it hard? Because a person doesn't have the capacity to do hard things in certain things, right? Like it's like, how many people do we know who talk about meditation versus how many people do meditation even once a week, right? Or
Yeah.
like everybody in America knows how to get healthy. Like there's not a motherfucker alive that doesn't know how to like eat well, doesn't know that eating well and exercise leads to a healthy lifestyle. But very few people actually do it because it's hard. And I think it's hard because we don't have the support. I mean, there's about 100 different things that a person needs around them and their support in their like neural network and within themselves, outside of themselves, to support that shit. And so I think like, man, if you can do even just a little bit, you're winning, man. And I know you, dude. I know I've known you for 10 years, and you're the best version of Daniel that I've ever met today. And I mean, you're kind of like about to like argue with me, it seems like, when you open your mouth about all this stuff, but I get it, dude.
Nah, man, I'm checking myself, dude. It is and isn't. It is and it isn't. It's paradox. You reach those places where you're like, you're right. But could it have been better if I just made better choices 5 times a day than I did for the last year and a half? I mean, that's what it comes to. It's not. It's you make. How many choices do we make every day, Ron? Fucking 500. You
Yeah,
know, I have a lot of access. I can choose my thoughts really well. Like I don't spin out on thoughts very often,
yeah.
and that gives me control over my
But you
emotions more.
used to.
Of course, yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. And I still do sometimes, but not nearly as much as I did, man.
yeah, yeah,
So my point is like I can choose my thoughts. I can choose what I eat. Like I'm very privileged in a lot of ways.
yeah,
And so why I just ask myself that. Like there's this topic of privilege that's up in the world right now, and you tip off the like 5 top privileges. I've probably got them. And so that privilege is fine, right? But you need to do something with it if you've got it, because you're living your life in the face of others,
yeah.
And I know that it's not like, well, people are starving in Africa, so I need to starve. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like, if people are starving in the world, enjoy your food, you know,
Well,
and
also the other thing that you're doing is sharing sharing your privilege by sharing your story of healing and encouraging others to move through the
yeah,
darkness.
yeah, absolutely.
And that's
But
important.
I appreciate you asking all this stuff. I think people get it. Like I, you know, I appreciate what you said about laziness. At the same time, I've just experienced too many times now, Ron, that I could go and do something that's right for myself or not. And I've experienced it 100 times when I did and 100 times when I didn't. And the difference between those two things happening a lot of times is just me deciding to or not deciding to. And one time slip on this side of the knife edge and one time on that.
Yeah,
And it's always better when I do it. And so I could do it more.
yeah,
And that's just like a leveling with myself. And the stakes seem higher now because now they involve another person.
yeah,
Like now me doing taking care of myself better means that the person I'm in love with like gets to be in love with someone who they actually like.
I would also say they get to be in love with somebody that they see. I think when we fall in love with each other, we fall in love with potential, and because we present potential, right? Um, and then the sometimes what we feel is a betrayal in a relationship is actually us not living up to the potential that we said that we presented and that they believed.
Well, that's another issue, man, because that was an important thing in my own personal journey in this relationship where I was like, don't fall in love with my potential. I asked them not to do that, you know,
Wow, interesting. Wow, that's really interesting.
because
So
I've had people do
you
it.
and I've never talked about this before, but that's really interesting. You use
No,
that.
I people fall in love with my potential all the time because I have a lot of potential, you
Yeah.
know. It's just like fall in love with me now because I don't know how much of that potential I'm gonna fulfill. I'm doing it, but like
Yeah.
please fall in love with me who I am now. And thankfully they were like conscious enough to be like, I hear you saying that, thank you. And then they adjusted the way they approached me. It's been awesome.
That's probably pretty freeing for you, isn't it? Just to like not have that shadow looming over you
Totally.
of every day some kind of regret building up, like, oh, I'm not this person, I'm not this person. It's just, and the shadow grows longer.
I still want to fulfill my potential because I know that'll be even more attractive, but at least I know the baseline is something that I
But you
like. I mean,
also, or I should ask, do you also know that you are happier when you like take some measure of effort towards that progress of potential?
full on.
I mean, that's
And my
why
potential is a lot of healthcare. So
that's why we're in this writers group together. Like
yeah,
both of us feel the potential of being writers and know that the demand of work and sacrifice and effort and discipline is huge.
that's the funny dichotomy. You're kind of hitting on something that I'm glad you are, is that even though I asked this person not to fall in love with my potential, if I stray from my path of fulfilling my potential for too long, I I feel unattractive. Like it's not like I'm saying, "Hey, I want to be the Lebowski and just like, love me for being the dude." It's not that. It doesn't work like that. Like I need to feel good about myself because
Yeah,
part of who I am, not my potential, part of who I am now is that I feel good about myself. That's the person they
yeah,
fell in love with. And so if I go backwards and start not doing the things that I need to do, then I'm not even who they fell in love with. It's
yeah,
not even potential. It's like the
yeah.
opposite.
Well,
Anyways, do you have your own experience around this?
fuck, are you kidding? Yes, because if we have, if I mean, I've spent years of like the 500 choices a day of like what's going to move my life forward, and I barely would make one choice a day because of fear and anxiety and um, feeling unsupported, not feeling allowed to pursue myself, having all kinds of other stories in my head create really legitimate feeling excuses. Um, uh, Over and over, getting into jobs that I had no business being in, shadow jobs that on the outside looked right, but were just completely separating me from my real potential. And that's the better part of my last 20 years, man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
uh, and so Morgan fell in love, dude. I mean, our first parts weeks of our relationship, I was reading to her the screenplay I wrote at the time, and at the time I was talking to a well-known writer, a guy who had made his way in Hollywood, a guy who's like, I love this story, I'm going to help you with this story, and then my wife sees all that potential just like disintegrate, like, and not just through that, but like over and over again with different things I had done in my our relationship, my own life. And interestingly enough, when I decided to really pursue my heart by writing for the joy of writing and not because I thought there was like some project on the horizon of like, oh, if I do this and I might could get a book deal or get this guy to talk to me again. the screenwriter, none of that. It was just like, just this is for me, purely for the joy of of gently blowing on the embers of my soul and rekindling that fire and watching my wife in turn. A this wasn't what I intended to go do, but watching in turn her attraction to me build, her desire for
Yeah.
belief in me and all those things. I mean, that's those I didn't pursue any of that for that, but those are for sure side effects. Good ones. Very good ones.
See, and I think that's Kairos time. When I'm talking about a different way to look at time, in the way I look at what you just said, not saying this is the way it empirically is,
Mm-hmm.
the way that I look at it is you have in some way returned to a part of yourself that you were doing in the beginning of your relationship that was attractive to your partner and fulfilling to you.
Yeah.
And for whatever reasons, I'm not saying it's negative, but you were attending to other things or got away from it. Maybe it was straight up negative, but you've returned to it.
Yeah.
And so I would think, and I don't know everything about your relationship, but I do know that you're doing, like you said, I'm doing the best quote, that I'm doing and you've ever seen. And so have you been.
Yeah.
So are you. And I see you thrive like that. We've known each other 11 years and been pretty honest with ourselves, with each other about what our issues are, every time we talk. And like, I know, that you returning to writing has been part of why you're thriving right now.
Oh, big time. I mean, it's almost like a plant that it should be in full sun and has been like in the back garden that never gets sun, Um, suddenly it's just like everything's blossoming and thriving. It's amazing.
Hey man, I know we're getting into that time, and it's later in Costa Rica where you are than it is here in Hawaii. But I wanted to ask one question that's been on my mind
Yeah.
in the theme of why we did this today
Yeah. Yeah.
is like, have you, Ronald, ever, how often do you cry tears that are like sad? Because you cry those tears of like joy, right? And you
Yeah.
cry tears of you're watching Rudy and he fucking makes the tackle and you're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, the different tears.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I have probably a couple times this year. Um, I'm thinking, I mean, it just depends on the season of my life, man. 2019 was a really fucking hard year. It was the hardest year I'd gone through in my marriage. Um, I was deep in a shadow career that was paying me better and better. I was um, also pursuing physically goals that I was always wanted to do, and so there was like good things, quote unquote, good things happening, but also me realizing like having to return to the real me was simultaneously happening with Morgan and I going through some really hard shit and us really questioning our relationship. I mean, that's just the easiest way to say it, is like us questioning like, are we for one another? And and yeah, there was tears of sadness around that, but there was also tears of sadness for like all of the betrayal I had wrought on myself by not choosing me, by not choosing my own self for years. And and sometimes, I would get stuck in periods of feeling like it was my parents' fault or feeling like it was my church's fault or something like that. And then there was this whole new world of grief of realizing like, well, it doesn't matter anymore. Now I'm in the driver's seat. And and then the grief of not knowing what to do. How do I do this? And not feeling supported and then getting the support and then the grief of thinking about how much work it's going to take. And it seemed like every time there was like an obstacle overcome, the story would like present and like, oh no, there's another big obstacle coming. And and finally, man, like that that desire to truly just be kinder to myself, um, which included for a while there, like daily verbalizing forgiveness for myself. And um, man, that those tears would come. The tears would come like randomly. They'd come when I'm trying to parent. They would come like at night. They would come in the shower when I would be thinking, I don't know why, but my brain just kind of like unfolds in the shower. Um, so I don't know. Does that
Well,
answer
like
your
you
question?
started, yeah, you started this conversation and I cut you off like in the first half minute, because I was curious. I wanted to like get to this when we'd explored other things and
Yeah.
just kind of set things up for us. But you were talking about your dad, and I don't mean to like beleaguer this like grief situation. It's just
Yeah.
I'm curious about it because I'm pretty new to healthfully processing grief, and any negative emotion. It's not like there's like grief tears and then there's like frustration tears. It's like it gets really warbly and nebulous. But
Yeah.
it seems like from what you're saying, you have a pretty healthy relationship. You cry a few times a year or whatever, negative tears. I'm not saying that there's a number that makes it
Yeah.
healthy.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I'm crying every fucking day, multiple times a day. Not totally, but like sometimes for an hour, like and I'm just like, what's healthy here? Where am I at?
I think it's all healthy, dude. I mean, this is just my opinion. This is not based on anything other than my own experience of crying out of fear, or not even out of fear, out of grief of something lost, or of absence, missed missed out on life. Um, I think. I mean, that's the point of the story earlier with me trying to rebury my dad. Man, is I couldn't. The his real funeral was such a comedy of errors. I didn't have the space for grief, and then the frustration of actually trying to create the space for grief like didn't work either, and that was very fucking frustrating. It was like blue balls of grief. It's like I just had to get it out and I couldn't get it out.
You nasty man. So apt though.
So I think that's why it would come out in weird places. It would just like suddenly grief was there, and I don't know what the little wild animal inside me finally felt safe enough to like cry, and it would just happen. And you know now it happens often during like sad movies like you're talking about. Like you know
Hmm.
we have a tradition in our family where we try to, it's getting a little harder now that my kids are older, but we try to like block off Friday nights. We have a projector in our house, and we have a nice family night, movie night, and something will happen. I can't even tell you what movies, but I'll feel myself just starting to cry, and I can like, I'm like, those like breaths you take during in between tears coming out of your face, and my kids are looking at me, and they don't have any fucking idea why I'm crying, and then I might hear my wife like whimpering on the other side of the couch. she, she's gone too.
Wow, that makes sense. I've always been like crying in movies is like my own private little thing, and I like to do it on my own. And whenever I'm watching a movie with someone, I generally hide myself. Like I like put my hand up, or like I put, it's just hard, man. I don't know why. It's just like it makes me. I do know why. I've been made fun of for crying, in my life, and it's like it's hard to get over that. But I really admire people who cry in front of people and cry in front of the people they're close to. And at the same time, there's a difference between crying about the happy things that happen in movies. And I've noticed that I start to cry at the like actually sad things, and I never did that before, man. And it's like, oh my god, I'm human, I'm
Yeah,
like
yeah,
human, I care.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the last thing that I just kind of wanted to share around this, again, just thanks for letting me express and share around, you know, what's happening emotionally with me. It means a lot. And I would love to talk at some point in time. We can just like open the conversation here because I've never mentioned it. But like, what gets the person to those tears, And if
Yeah,
they're healthy and they need to come out, how do you get to them? And one thing I've noticed, okay, so like movies can do it,
yeah,
life can do it. But one thing I've noticed that really gets me is like serious fucking conflict with a partner.
yeah.
And
Morgan and I have always talked about. I think we heard this. I think we read it. I can't remember who said this. It's been said. I know we weren't the first people to say this. We read it somewhere, but it's been said that relationships are like the crucible of our soul. And you know what a crucible is?
I looked that up recently. It's the thing that you pour a mold into, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you fucking light it on fire. Like it's like basically the pot that boils gold that
Yes,
for the
that's
mold, and all of the impurities in the gold that float to the top,
right.
and you scrape it out, and it's this process over and over again of like of heating the gold up to get the impurities out, and that's why we get the 12 carat, 14 carats, so, 24 carat, like it's a different level of purity of gold, and that is a relationship. That's the gift of a
Oh,
sacred relationship.
absolutely, man. A healthy, thriving relationship, 100% crucible.
Yeah, yeah. And what's tough about that is if you both aren't aware of what's happening, uh it can feel like, well, this person's hurting me, so I need to get on the defensive and raise my voice, stand up, put my chest out, um fucking ghost them, not respond to them, not come home, drink a lot, whatever. And but if you allow it, back to your original answer a few minutes ago, which was like, how do you connect with those tears, man? I mean, there's a there's a, like I said earlier in this podcast, like it's about 100 different things, and I think a big part of it is allowing yourself to feel the feelings, whatever those feelings are. A long time ago, you were like, Ron, I think you've got some rage pent up in you, and and
What do you mean by a long time ago?
I remember you said that to me, like when we were back in our first iteration of our relationship, when we were practicing martial arts together, and um, I've got this new tattoo of this bull, which is a bull that I had an experience with in southern Spain, um, and I was rethinking about it just the other day. I was like, oh, um, these animals are really docile until they get poked, and then they're not. Then they like then the wildness that we've allowed them to stay in them through our breeding process like comes fully out, and there's no stopping it. And I thought maybe that's why I was attracted to this, because sometimes that happens to me, and this all this rage comes out, and I don't like that in me all the time, and I've had to find the safe places for that to come out, because it used to come out with my kids, and I think that's like the lowest form of of I don't even know what to call it. I just have no respect for it in myself or any others that rage on their kids for their own shit. And that's definitely what I did, and that's definitely a big reason I stopped drinking. Um,
Yeah, that's another whole nother thing, right? Anxiety is emotion over grief for me. Well,
yeah,
what's anger over? Like I find it very difficult to be angry when I'm grieving.
yeah,
And when I'm open and vulnerable. But that's a whole
yeah.
nother thing.
But I mean, I'm still thinking of like what the answer to that is, and it's man, like it's everything. It's like pull out all the stops, like call in all the troops, go to the therapist, you know, start exercising, like eat well, sleep well,
Watch the movies that,
yeah, watch the movies, like just freaking get out of the bad relationships, have a good night out with your friends, like everything. Like, it takes all of it.
getting to tears can be like, this is what I'm saying. Like, I've noticed that to get to these places that feel so good and so cathartic, I need to go through a damaging conflict with a loved one. And it's like you can only hit that little button so many times before you break the thing. You break the relationship.
Well, that's the yeah, and I'd say that happened to Morgan and I in 2019. It's like when we were really questioning, are we gonna do this? Especially for me, like because my nervous system response is relationships and conflict must end in divorce, and I was like, well, this is the way this is gonna have to end, and
Yeah.
instead I realized like, oh, I've actually got to confront in me all the stuff I don't even know that needs to be like actually dealt with. And a lot of tears came in for sure.
Because you were in,
Well,
because you knew that it was the threat to the actual relationship.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
because
totally.
the relationship, um, I mean, I think relationships are those places we put so much stock into, right? Like we make them mean a lot to us. And more than that, we put ourselves out there. We're very, very vulnerable in these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is probably something we're going to want to revisit like every once in a while. This, like, how do you deal with this hardship, and how does a person um, exercise the stuff that we carry around both consciously and subconsciously? Because some of it we know we're pressing down, like the Bill Burr joke we referenced earlier about just stuffing the emotions in the jar and putting it on the shelf so that it
Yeah.
comes out later. Bed Bath and Beyond in rage. And like that's
Well,
kind
it's sorry.
of, I mean, that's kind of the conscious way, and then there's the subconscious way of like, just not even knowing that that shit exists. Like like you asked your adopted dad like what you were like, and he, as a child, he said you were just like happy to be in a safe zone, and your nervous system's like, I cannot deal with this right now, so I'm gonna like just put this on the back burner, the back burner, put this in the time machine, the time box, the time capsule
There you go.
that says do not open until 2010.
Kairos time, man. We'll visit this later, you know.
Yeah.
Or yeah, or just like yeah, time capsule that just starts to build pressure. Well, hey man, and I just want to recognize that I don't fucking know these answers either. I just know the sort of trench work I've done is over time leading to somewhere. But I
Yeah.
also respect, that I don't know really how the psyche works. It's a mystery, man. None of us really do. I
Yeah.
mean,
True.
it's a total mystery.
Yeah.
And okay, maybe it's not a total mystery. We get some like things that are working for people, but I don't really know what's going on inside. I just ascribe things to it and work with it. And if it seems to make sense and I get better, I'll keep going with that. But that doesn't mean it's going to A, last or work for anybody else, or B, there's not a better way even for me. Right. So, you
Yeah.
know,
I'm I think I have a lot to say around that, but I won't. I won't right now.
really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not a disagreement. I just think that it's kind of just an expanding on everything you just said, and I don't think I need to.
Well, maybe we can do this again, man, because I'm realizing that this is talking about relationships, talking about emotions, growing up in emotional intelligence is kind of the key phrase that's going around. It's a value of mine, and I'm making a little bit of ground, and that even a little bit of ground vastly improves my life. And
Well,
you
I
know,
want to, before we jump off, I want to challenge you with one thing, and that is like when you are confronted tomorrow, or even let's say tonight, let's just say tonight, okay? I've got maybe an hour left before I go to bed.
Yeah.
and you've got 5 6 hours, and you're confronted with, do I make the choice that grows my consciousness, that heals my consciousness, that expands my consciousness, or do I make the choice where I like just fuck off for a while? Like,
There you go.
what are you gonna do? So my question to you is not a challenge, not I'm not like putting you on the spot, but really to both of us, like when you notice that, what's tell me your game plan? What's your game plan around that now?
I think that's a great question, a great challenge. And I think instead of being like, good call, I'm going to do that. And then I flip my laptop down, say goodbye to you, and like do whatever I want.
Yeah,
It's actually a really good way to like, quote, challenge someone. And I would say I would have to tease it out a little bit. Like, these conversations calm my nervous system a lot because
yeah,
I'm doing something that I am passionate about and care about and that I'm almost positive will help the world, even if it's just help you and me,
right,
you know.
totally,
But I can tell I feel good right now. And
yeah,
um, when we get off this call, maybe I would feel start to have thoughts or feelings that do feel a little bit more out of my control, because that does happen to me sometimes. I mean, it does happen to me. And I would say like things that would be important for me to keep this night going well is I'm hosted by someone here in Hawaii, and
mm,
they're close to me, Becca, the person I've been talking about.
yeah,
Well, she just got home, and it'd be good to connect with her and just like see how she's doing. Um and then also like I think I haven't moved my body today and taking care of it in ways that I know I need to. And doing that before I go to bed would be good. But then also not checking my phone too much because
dude,
my
yeah,
phone fucking increases my anxiety
yeah,
level every time I look at it, whether it's good news or bad news that
yeah,
pops up.
yeah, 100%, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm closing my eyes and like giving a big sigh because
I
if
can tell,
90,
man.
99% of the time, if there's a betrayal of myself, it involves my phone.
Agreed.
99% of the time.
I had an idea today that hit me about around the phone, and I know we're like planting seeds now for future conversations.
Yeah,
But like I noticed that if I check my phone once an hour instead of once every 5 minutes, that I always get the thing that I'm looking for on that phone if I check it once an hour because it's had an hour to like for someone I want to hear from to message me.
yeah,
But if I check it 5 minutes, every 5 minutes, then like 20 times an hour or like, I don't know, whatever, 10 times an hour,
yeah,
I get nothing and I feel like rejection and like a hit. And I just realized that's another little way to just adjust your relationship with your phone that might not be so little, but that now turns every time you look at the phone, you do get good news. It's less during the day and way less, of like a rejection. I don't know, just like so many little tricks and hacks around the phone that I just wish I could just do instead of not do.
we should get the guys in our men's group to think about this maybe, and maybe do like a 6 times a day phone check challenge or something,
That's a great idea.
where this is what you get every 2 hours, whatever. I don't know, I'm just making numbers up, but
I hear you, man.
interesting idea, very interesting idea. um I know it's something my wife and I talk about almost on the daily, and the fear that we have around it for our kids and all that stuff. It's this whole other can of worms and this whole other universe for the generations to come. Man, I love you. It's a real big gift. I wanted to ask you some running advice if I could before we finish.
Running?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. So my feet don't hurt right now, but the my ankle and my right foot, which was like on the upper slope of the beach as I was running,
Yep.
is a little swollen around the tendon, like between the tendon and the ball joint.
In your
Um,
ankle, not the foot,
my ankle, yeah, but it kind of goes down to the foot too a little bit,
to your
like
heel.
yeah, around the heel. It doesn't hurt, but it's definitely like fatter than the other ankle. I was planning on going running tomorrow. Should I stay off of this thing, or should I like be a man and to
Well,
run?
you know that I have a lot of problems with that statement. Be a man and just do it.
I
Like
know,
it's
that's why I said it.
you want to be a stupid man, then do it. I okay. Without being with you and checking it out, I do have a decent amount of awareness around foot, knee, hip.
Yeah.
I meet with my PT person a lot, and I would say, does it get into the bottom of your foot at the base of your heel,
Oh, let me see.
like plantar fasciitis? Does it get into that?
Like swelling?
No, not swelling, just any sort of sensation or pain. I
No,
know you have no
no.
pain.
Bottom of my feet's great.
Okay. Yeah, man, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I've never, the ankle is like me and my PT, which I would almost love to have on the show. I've thought about it many times. He's a special dude. We were talking a couple days ago about the ankles, and it's just
Mm,
like, what an incredible joint, right?
yeah,
Like we take all of our weight all day long whenever we're on the feet, and people have problems with their knees and hips way more than they do with their ankles.
true. Yeah,
Man, I would ice it, take some anti-inflammatories. I know that there's you can and can't do that. It's fine without that. But I think that it sounds like a matter of degree for you. I wouldn't run on an uneven surface, and I
yeah,
would take it slow and do less than you usually do. That's my gut feeling.
yeah, yeah. Maybe I shouldn't have gone all in on a, a long ass run on the beach.
Take it easy,
So,
man.
so good. All right, man. Love you, dude. This was really needed, and is needed still conversation that I'm looking forward to having more of. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm glad we got to connect tonight.
You rallied for me. I know you saw a look on my face. I wanted to talk to you about this, and we did on our own, and then it just kept
It's
my mind. I
beautiful.
wanted to do a little session on it that would potentially be public, and I hope it's valuable. And I just really appreciate you being like indulging me in some sense and just being really generous in the other sense. Thanks.
It doesn't feel like indulgence, man. It feels like friendship.
All right. All right. Well, I love you too. Thank you so much, Ron.
I love you, dude. Talk to you later. That bird is amazing, by the way.
These are coquis. They're little frogs. They're called coquis.
No way. What?
Yeah. Yeah. They go off at night, and a lot of people can't stand them. But for people who don't actually live here and deal with them every night, they're completely charming.
The geckos here also have like a very funny sound. It's crazy to think this little animal this big can make this.
I know, man. It's like, how the fuck does that thing make that sound?
Yeah. All right. We'll have an Animal Kingdom episode someday. All right, man. Love you. Talk to
See
you
you
later.
again.